Welcome to SLBA Lanka Live. In this podcast, we celebrate our deep love for Sri Lanka and share the inspiring stories that are shaping its future. Join us as we explore the journeys of remarkable individuals who are making significant contributions in business, networking, and personal growth. Each episode features insightful conversations aimed at uplifting and motivating, showcasing the passion and innovation within our community. Please note that the views and opinions expressed by our guests are their own, reflecting the diverse voices that enrich our society. So, sit back, relax, and let's embark on this exciting journey together.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Lanka Live, a podcast series launched by the Singapore Sri Lanka Business Association to spotlight inspiring individuals, hot topics, and important issues for the Sri Lankan community across the world. The SLBA is a non-profit organization established in Singapore over 30 years ago, and we have no religious, racial, or political affiliation in any way. I'm Lakshanthi Fernando, and I'm the president of SLBA, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Aritha Wickremasinghe, a lawyer, an activist, an advisor to the Sri Lankan government, but he's here today in his personal capacity to talk to us. Aritha and I have also been friends for many years. We've known each other since we were 16 years old, and we're a little bit older now, and I'm really excited to have him as our first guest for Lanka Live. Aritha, thank you for joining us today. It's a very special occasion for us at the SLBA, and I'm really glad that you could be our first guest. I, along with many others, have followed your incredible journey in activism over the years. But for those who may not know, could you give us a brief snapshot of your background and what led you into the activism you're so well known for today?
First of all, thank you, Lucky. It's nice to, as you said, we've been friends since we were 16. I'm 40 now.
Thank you for letting everyone know.
But it's nice to be here in a different capacity, not just as friends, but also as professionals to appreciate what each one of us have achieved and done over the years. As you said, I'm a lawyer. I didn't start off as a lawyer. I started off first studying political science with sociology, and then I moved into a career in law. But law and the activism which comes from law is something which has always been sort of within me since childhood. I think many of us who decide to pursue a career in law, we do it because we have a sense and a passion for justice. Although, in reality, I have a banking finance background in law. Did I ever envision that, did I choose a career in law because I want to be reviewing a 300-page loan agreement? No, I don't think any of us, that is not the vision of law we have, but it is still a very important component of law. But my first foray into as an activist was, ever since I was 12 years old. As a child, I used to read newspapers every day. And that was one of the advice my Sinhala school teacher told me. And during that time, there was a lot of news stories on child sexual abuse in Sri Lanka and pedophilia. And Sri Lanka had just changed the legal age of consent for children, for sexual consent, from 12 to 16. So in a way, pedophilia was legal in Sri Lanka because 12 was the age of consent. And it had just, or was in the process of changing to 16, but there were so many issues around child sexual abuse. And I thought, as a child, that I should take more of a role in my protection and educating other children about our protection and our rights. So I set up an organization in school called the Children's Welfare Organization. Originally, it was called the Child Rights Organization, but the school thought I was starting a trade union for children. So they said I had to change the name. So we changed the name. What we did was we then went to different schools in Colombo to educate other children about their rights. And we worked with UNICEF and the National Child Protection Authority, which had just been established. So it was very empowering, not just for me, but for other children to see here are children coming to talk to other children about their rights, about sexual and physical violence against children. And I saw that kind of change in perspective, being given that recognition by adults that, hey, these are children who are empowered by themselves. And I'm seeing that change being affected. I saw my activism had an impact because adults and others and teachers were taking child rights more seriously because there was a child speaking. And I think that's when I really saw the power of law together with activism to change society and to change mindsets. So that was really my beginning, was as a 12, 13-year-old child.
I mean, I think just you being who you are, authentically, unapologetically yourself, I think that has also had an enormous impact on others. I mean, I knew you since we were 16, and I think you were the first openly gay person I knew, and my parents knew as part of my friendship circle. But because you were just yourself, I think that had an enormous impact in terms of opening people's eyes, seeing, being open to accepting people as who they are, and realizing we're all human beings at the end of the day. And a lot of the judgments and unconscious biases that we may have are quickly dispelled when people are really themselves. And I think you did an enormous impact in other people's lives, which you may not even realize at a very young age by just being yourself. And I think some of the initiatives that you've been part of, one of them that I think of often is, and I cite often, is your work in colorism, which I think is really important, and we should still not forget about how important it is to change the mindsets of especially young, impressionable women about colorism and just equating fairness, for example, to beauty or status. Can you tell me a little bit more? I know I'm going a little bit off what we talked about, but I really want to hear more, because today someone was citing examples to me in Sri Lanka of a real movement to have injectables and have tablets to change the color of your skin, which is really concerning from my point of view as a mother of two young girls, one fairer skin, one darker skinned. I want them to grow up in a world where they're accepted for who they are. They do not equate a certain skin color to beauty or trying to change who they are. So can you tell me a little bit of your work in that space and how important that has been? And do you think it's still something we need to talk about?
First of all, I want to thank you for your very kind comments and appreciation of my authenticity and coming out as gay when I was 15 years old, again, 1999. And the kind of acceptance I received, and that acceptance I received was from you. You're one of them. And I don't think I'll be this sort of confident person without people like you in my life. So I really want to appreciate and thank you.
You were also the only guy we wanted to dance with at the school. And all the other guys wanted.
And all the parents loved me. And all the boys were jealous, thinking I was interested in these women when I wasn't. But I think all of that, whether it was my work as a child rights activist, whether it was accepting myself and being openly gay and authentic to that, and my work on colorism or women's rights or LGBT rights, it's really based on that foundation of self-acceptance, being authentic to ourselves and wanting to live in a world where being yourself isn't something that's lucky. It shouldn't be luck. It shouldn't be a privilege to be who we are, whatever color we are. And, it should be the norm that we have to accept people for who they are and value them for what they bring to the table, not the color of their skin, not their gender or sexual orientation or religion. And I liked it how when you opened today's session, you spoke, look, we're not affiliated or promoting any religion or race or whatever, because really those things don't matter. What matters is who we are as people. And, colorism is an issue which is very pervasive in our cultures, in South Asian culture, in Sri Lankan culture particularly. And I think it's important that we learn to value and accept people for what they bring to the table, not their race, religion, their sexual orientation, gender, the color of their skin. And that's a very pervasive problem we have here in Sri Lanka and in South Asia, where people are judged on so many irrelevant characteristics, and they're made to feel small or lesser because of that. And we judge people a lot here on the color of their skin. And this is part of the colonial hangover, 500 years of having been ruled by Europeans. And one of the tactics of how superiority and inferiority was imposed on people was classifying people on the color of their skin. The white rulers are ruling over you because they're white, and you deserve to be subservient and colonized because you're not white, you're brown, you're black, your skin is darker. And this, 500 years, how do you unpack, how do you undo half a millennia of this kind of brainwashing and propaganda? And what has been unfortunate is that post-independence, not only have we self-perpetuated these values, but corporates, international, multinational corporates coming from these Western countries who were the former colonizers exploited this for commercial gain. We grew up for decades, for generations, having products by some of the largest multinationals in the world, selling us products which were telling us that we needed to be fairer and whiter, to be more accepted, to be more valued. And this problem, a lot of these brands, especially after the Black Lives Matter movement, they sort of rebranded, they changed. Instead of saying fair or white, they became, brightening and, more empowering messages. But it's too late, For decades, you made billions of dollars by telling us that we were not worth it because we were not whiter or fairer. And you exploited a half a millennia of exploitation and colonialism, that now our people are injecting themselves with, dangerous, unregulated chemicals. They are taking pills just to be a few shades lighter, just to feel that much, little bit more valued than they are. And that's having social issues and repercussions. It is huge mental health consequences. It has huge costs on the healthcare system. And I think it also has huge costs in terms of how we see ourselves as a culture, as a people, and a nation. Do we feel that we have to change our skin tone to be successful and accepted as a people? Because we are a brown people, So most of the world is brown and black. Sri Lanka as a nation is brown. That's, we may have different shades of brown, but we're brown people. So it affects the national psyche. And I successfully did campaign on changing a lot of these international brands in terms of how they market these products. But in a way, it was too late. And I have to accept that. It may be one victory that we won, but actually, in a way, we've lost too.
Yes, and I like the fact that you brought up the colonial hangover that we have, because when people try to make the point that tanning is similar in Western cultures, you want to be tanner, or changing the color of your hair is a similar issue. It's not actually the same thing, because colorism and thinking being fairer is superior, comes from a class system. People out in the fields are darker skinned, and people in their homes who are richer are fairer skinned. It comes from those hang-ups there. So it's more than just equating it to tanning or equating it to changing your color, because it comes from a belief or underlying conditioning that one thing is more superior than the other.
Yeah.
Therefore, you must change yourself. And I certainly do not want my children growing up in a world where they think that they are not as beautiful or not as worthy because of the natural skin color they have. And I have my father to thank in many ways that growing up, he always conditioned me the opposite way. So go out in the sun, get darker, go out at the beach. He wanted me to believe that darker skin is beautiful and that when I go off to Europe, everyone wants to be like me. So I think it's really important as parents as well. We have a real responsibility to educate and empower our own children, even if the world may see things a different way. And I'm glad to see a lot of designers in Sri Lanka, a lot of models coming up who are changing that viewpoint in a positive way by being themselves and also presenting an authentic aesthetic of what it is to be a Sri Lankan. And I credit a lot of them for the work that they do, and a lot of the designers put those models forward as well to change those mindsets that often starts with fashion in many ways. But to go back to the activism that we've been talking about, I don't think activism is easy for anyone, and your whole life has been, in a way, being an activist, whether you've realized it or not. I know, being friends with you as well for many years, that you've been the subject of criticism, of false stories, some very dangerous stories. Are you able to share a little bit more about that, and also how you coped with that to continue the work that you're doing? Because sometimes when we face that type of criticism, or if it affects our family and those close to us, we might want to step away a little bit and question whether this is something we really want to do or people are appreciating what we're doing. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, it's, as you've said, it's not for anyone. It's not always a straight road, and it's not always an easy ride, and there are challenges. For me particularly, I've had quite a few. I think one notable one was connected to an education program, which I was involved in founding and setting up. It was a program called Think Equal. It was actually the outcome of, if you recall, about 12 years ago, there was this horrific gang rape of a medical student in Delhi, in India. And when that gang rape happened, there was so much international and regional outcry about the problem of sexual violence against women by men. We have to be conscious of the perpetrators of this kind of violence. And following that, there was a documentary made by one of my friends who was a director called Leslie Adwin, and it was called India's Daughter. And this was a very powerful and moving documentary which really went into the mindset of what makes someone do something so horrific, someone else, particularly a woman. What entitles a man to do that? That was the question of this documentary, going deeper into the mindset, the psyche. And we realized throughout this whole conversation, this is a mindset problem. We need to change people's mindsets to end this cycle of violence. And we had to get the director out, and then the I Pro Bono team, which is one of the charities I've been involved with for a very long time, where we provide free legal assistance to people. We've been involved in sort of, challenging that ban and also advocating for the issue which this movie was about. And we had several sort of panel discussions and stuff around this film. And the question was always, okay, yes, we're lawyers, we're filmmakers, we know there's a problem. And law often comes in after the problem, right? Law is not there to, it's not generally, especially criminal law, it's not providing solutions. It's a form of retribution almost when the problem has already occurred. So you want to, let's take a step back. How do we prevent this problem? And yes, the answer is education. We're not educationists, so where do we start? So we reached out to various education organizations, whether it was Montessori, Yale, Stanford, and we all realized, okay, there's a missing subject in education in schools. We are teaching children math, science, literature, but we're not teaching children how to be human beings. And And this missing subject was social emotional learning for children. So we really brought together the brightest minds in the world on early years education, and we created this really incredible curriculum. And there was so much Sri Lankan involvement, especially through me, through my advocacy on this curriculum, and how important it was, not just to stop gender-based violence, but also, racial violence and different kinds of discrimination, but also empowering children to be more empathetic, to think critically, to solve problems peacefully. It's a very enriching curriculum. And one of the reasons I moved back to Sri Lanka was because I wanted Sri Lanka to be the first country to pilot, to run this program, to launch it. And we did so much amazing, incredible work. The pilot was having the most incredible outcomes and stories. I gave a TEDx talk on it, and the transformative impact it was happening on children in such a short period of time. And we were working with the government institutions here, ready for a rollout, doing the cultural adaptation, translations. There was a pilot in 60 schools. And unfortunately, just before it was going to be rolled out, several politicians and people with, I guess, vested interest in it ran this horrendous campaign against this education program, saying that it was promoting homosexuality to young children because there was a gay man running it. And it really, really broke me, because first of all, it was a lie. This is a program for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. Forget about trying to promote homosexuality. I mean, any form of sexual education is completely inappropriate and not relevant, right? We were teaching children stories on acceptance of whatever skin color they were in, trying to play games on how to solve problems without fighting each other. But it was such a strong attack based on so much lies. And there was this real risk and it did, to sabotage the entire program. And I had so much guilt for it because I thought, I am gay and I'm an openly gay man. And for me, I thought all this hard work done by so many incredible people has been tarnished or destroyed because of my sexual orientation. Something which I'm not in control of, right? It's the way I was born, it's who I am. And I resigned from the board of the program. I stepped aside, said I did not want to have anything to do with education and children anymore. And unfortunately, the program died in Sri Lanka. And we were very worried about the contagion of it because we were piloting it in Nigeria, in Uganda, not many countries who were very open or accepting of people of diverse sexual orientations. So I thought the best thing I can do is actually leave it. And maybe if by leaving it, we end up creating a world that is better than what we're doing in now, that we're living in now, I would still win. Right. So that really broke me. But it also allowed me to focus more on my pro bono work through iPro Bono and to be unashamedly gay as well. I was also I worked in government. I never hid my sexual orientation. And through iPro Bono, we did continue to do amazing work on advancing the rights of women, advancing the rights of the LGBT plus community, advancing the rights of children. And I didn't have to be afraid anymore of hiding myself or not speaking about issues I was passionate about because I was conscious working with children's education. There was a lot I had to hide because, people always have this perception about the gay man, right? This is this false perception of trying to portray us as some kind of predators or pedophiles. And not only is that factually wrong, because we read the news every day. I mean, just right now in Sri Lanka, we're dealing with this horrific story of a 16, 15-year-old schoolgirl who's been raped by 22 men over the course of 1.5 years, and they let this girl child be raped for this long. LGBT people are not the ones doing these things, But we still label the gay man, the LGBT person, as a predator. And we do that to prevent people like me from doing any kind of work, right? What has my sexual orientation got to do with my profession? As a lawyer, it's got nothing. It's completely irrelevant. Like your sexual orientation is completely irrelevant to your skill set. So just because I'm in education, what has that got to do? Yeah, I mean, it was tragic, but I have moved on from it. And I feel I have become a better person as a result of it.
And I suppose it shows how people just forget about the bigger picture and get so narrow-minded in their own biases or underlying issues, or sometimes even jealousy of someone else's ability to pull off something as big as a project like Think Equal. We don't know what their agenda or motivations are, but fundamentally it takes away from the good that the project was trying to do and achieve. And it's almost laughable to think you can teach homosexuality in itself. But to touch on that a little bit further, I suppose I sometimes wonder, and thinking through your career as well, I mean, I'm no activist in the same way you are, but I've, in my various roles, have had my own friendships and personal relationships been challenged because of a bigger role you might take outside of that. And in terms of your activism and your very strong personal beliefs and principles, because fundamentally you have to be quite a principled person to drive these initiatives, and you have to stay quite firm in those principles. Have your personal friendships that you may have had for many, many years, or relationships, been particularly challenged because of that in any way? Or do you find people are overwhelmingly supportive and along for the ride?
I think I've found people mostly overwhelmingly supportive, especially with my friends and my family. It doesn't mean that we're all aligned on the same goals or beliefs, but I think being activists first, or being a human being, or being a friend, we have to learn to accept people for who they are. And we have to learn to meet someone where they are. And that's part of the activism. Part of changing the way people think is not to reject someone just because they don't understand you, to mock someone because they're different, or you think they're not qualified or educated or informed enough. If I have to convince you that there's a better way, I have to start where you are first. And, I've been lucky that I've had friends who've always been supportive, and we've all been on this journey together in many ways. And I've had friends who we haven't always seen eye to eye. But there's so much more to someone than just, a belief or a value they may have on a particular subject or topic, right? Friendship, any relationship is a lot more than that. And there's so much I feel we can learn to love and accept with each other, while also accepting there are things that you're not going to agree on. And I don't think friendships or any relationship should be destroyed or ended because there are some differences. There will always be differences. We just have to learn to live with them.
To pivot a little bit, you talked about iPro Bono, which I think is an incredible initiative when you think about it, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's essentially an organization that connects lawyers with people who need support, whether it's representation, as advocates for them who do not have the resources to afford lawyers. Have there been any similar initiatives that you've been involved in your time with iPro Bono in Sri Lanka that have made a really big impact?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, quite a few. We're involved in several cases a lot of the time. We were, in terms of, say, LGBT rights, we've done a lot of cases here. We had a case back in 2018 which was the first case that recognized that a transgender person, once they have finished their gender reassignment, could enter into a legal and valid marriage. And also the first time the court accepted and recognized their gender recognition certificate and their process of transition. We had a case about 2 years ago where the court accepted, this is the case where a lesbian woman was being prosecuted because she was a lesbian. And the police were trying to subject her to physical examinations, which includes vaginal examinations and psychiatric examinations to find evidence of her being a lesbian. And we were able to stop that practice. In this one particular case, the court accepted that homosexuality in itself is not a crime, and neither is it a mental illness. So there was no need for these kind of examinations. We were able to convince the head of police to issue a circular to stop the practice of these examinations, and then to establish a DIG of police to be responsible for complaints by the LGBT community of incidences of harassment and violence. We were also part of the Supreme Court case last year. I was actually one of the petitioners where the court, in its determination, accepted that the bill in Parliament right now to decriminalize consensual relationships between consenting adults is constitutional, not just constitutional, but it actually would be advancing the fundamental rights of all citizens and the achievement of dignity. It's actually a very, very beautiful decision by the court. It's only a half-page amendment to the law, but it was a 44-page determination from the court on why it's necessary for this law to pass. So we were also involved in a case where, again on the LGBT rights space, where a court granted a protection order for a lesbian woman from her family who were abusing her on the grounds of her sexual orientation, and we used the Domestic Violence Act for that. So again, these were not superior court cases, but these were quite fundamental in terms of changing the sort of judicial discourse and narrative on these issues.
And law is, of course, a very powerful tool in affecting change. So I think what Pro Bono does is incredibly powerful in many ways in transforming what you think of as allowed or permissible behavior. And if people don't have the resources to get good representation, the system may never change.
Yeah. Actually, we just also won a case a few weeks ago. It was a right to information case for the National Child Protection Authority to release all the data on child abuse in Sri Lanka and who are the main perpetrators, what the police is doing. The authority was sort of withholding this information. So Pro Bono filed a case at the Right Information Commission on this, and we won that case. And now we were able to get a lot of this information. And so we know we have a better picture of what's happening to our children. And now we're preparing how do we respond to these and who do we hold accountable. So we're looking at other strategic litigation.
Well, Sri Lanka has been through challenging times, to say the least.
Yeah.
The war, the tsunami, the pandemic, and the recent unprecedented economic crisis. I know you moved back a few years ago in 2017, and around the time that a lot of people were moving back to Sri Lanka, and what some called the reverse brain drain. Young Sri Lankan professionals were leaving well-paying jobs overseas and moving back to Sri Lanka. In hindsight now, looking back on what the country has been through and the challenging times, do you still believe that you made the right decision moving back?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have zero regrets about moving back here. And I moved back also, I'm a gay man. I got married to my husband 2 years ago. He lives here too, and we live mostly in a village off the town of Gaul in the south. And we have a very happy life together. But also as a country, I have no regrets because I have a lot of hope and faith in my country and my people. And I moved back from the UK, not because I didn't make it there. My history in my career. I worked in one of the best law firms in the world, and I was very recognized for my work. I had a good reputation for the work I was doing. And then in 2015, I was ranked as number one future business leader by the Financial Times. And I was ranked alongside people like Mark Zuckerberg, who was, an actual business leader, or Inga Beale, who was the CEO of Lloyd's. And actually, that's the time when I started thinking, I was like, what am I doing here? Why am I in this first world country making rich people richer? And I've now had the experience. I've now got the recognition for my skills and the work I'm doing. And I want to, and I should go back now and give something back to my country. And a lot of the work I've been doing since I've been back, there's been a lot of government service work I've done. And I've really enjoyed it. Of course, it's been challenging. But no job is going to be fun if it's not challenging. And, and I see this country changing. Yes, it's had to take several steps back, but we're also taking steps forward. And there are so many amazing, incredible people here who want to take that step forward. And I feel that we should all be doing it together. And I wouldn't want to let anyone down by leaving.
I mean, I think it's incredibly commendable what you did, moving back to do good in the country of your birth with the skill sets that you have. And we can only hope that the country and those powers to be leverage on the talented individuals who come back to Sri Lanka and use the skills that they have and the exposure and experience they've gained overseas and working in international organizations, and leverage on that instead of seeing it maybe as a threat or something different or foreign, but rather leverage on it and utilize it for the good of the whole country and effect change in a powerful way. I know that in the recent times, with all the challenges, there have been a number of young Sri Lankans moving overseas, looking to move overseas. What would you say to those young Sri Lankan professionals who are thinking of leaving the country for good because of the challenging times they've been through?
Look, I don't blame anyone who has left or is thinking or wanting to leave. At the end of the day, we all have to make decisions which are best for us and which are best for our families, right? That always comes first. It's difficult to kind of put what's best, something as abstract as what's best for the country, to prioritize that when you're really looking at, how do I feed my family? How do I ensure there's a sense of security for my family? That's anyone's priority. But what I would tell people someone who's looking to move abroad, someone who's already abroad, is go. Go and get that experience, get that professional knowledge. The kind of international exposure is super and very important. And when you're ready and when you are stronger, come back.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
And there are so many reasons people move and stay overseas as well. But I think Sri Lanka does draw people who are born in Sri Lanka and grew up here back to Sri Lanka in many ways.
And Sri Lanka is not going to go anywhere, right? It's going to keep floating in the middle of the Indian Ocean. So it's going to be there. And it'll be there for you to come back when you're ready.
So to kind of close things off a little bit, we are gearing up to the elections in Sri Lanka at the end of the year. And I know you're here in a personal capacity, but you do work with the Sri Lankan government and you've been an advisor. What is your hope in a personal capacity, but what is your hope for the future of the country?
Well, if you're looking from an electoral political basis, my hope is that we, as a people, we elect a right leader who will be able to make difficult decisions to set us on a path of progress and prosperity. My hope is that whoever is elected, we have to respect the democratic mandate. And it's a very beautiful thing we have here. And that whoever is elected, that they are able to have the strength and the capacity to make those difficult decisions and to put us on the right path for a country that is not just economically prosperous, not just economically progressive, but also is socially inclusive and socially progressive. Because I do not believe we can have economic progress without social progress. They go hand in hand. And we create and we have a country where everyone can be and feel Sri Lankan. That's really my hope.
That's wonderful. I know what the short take's going to be from this video. I do share your optimism for the future of the country. I often say we're small but mighty, and Sri Lankans are one thing, and that is resilient. But our goal is to empower others, elevate the perception of Sri Lanka in the communities we belong to. And we have to be aware and evolved enough to understand that the perception of the country has a trickle-down effect on the perception of ourselves, even in the countries we may work in and reside in overseas. We are impacted by it. So the better the country is doing and the more positive the perception is of the country, the more positive it will be for us and our families on an individual basis. And it would be naive for us to think otherwise. But I just wanted to thank you, Aritha, for joining us today. There were several moments in this interview. I was so thankful that I picked you as the first guest. It's been such a wonderful discussion. And I've learned a lot about you that I didn't know before, including how you started in activism as a young child. I didn't know all of that background. So either I've not been listening very well, but this was very enlightening for me. And I wanted to thank everyone for joining us for this very first episode of Lanka Live. It's been a delight to have you with us, and we hope that you can join us for future episodes of our Lanka Live series and help make us a successful podcast series. And if there's anything in particular you'd like us to talk about or inspiring individuals you'd like us to spotlight, please do get in touch and leave a comment below. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you, Aritha, again.
Thank you. Thank you.